Good evening and welcome. My name is Zubin Austin. I am a professor in the Koffler Chair at the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy and the Academic Director for the Center for Practice Excellence. I'm delighted to be your moderator for tonight's discussion on independent ownership in pharmacy. First, I would like to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Wherever you may sit, wherever you may work, wherever you may live, I hope you too will think about the land on which we operate and be grateful for the opportunity to do so. Tonight's panel is brought to you in partnership by the Office of Advancement and Alumni Relations and the Center for Practice Excellence at the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy. Tonight's panel is sponsored by our partners, Pharmasave and National Bank. As you may be aware, today is Giving Tuesday, a global philanthropic movement, and it is especially gratifying to acknowledge the support of our sponsors and the impact they have on delivering high-quality programming and opportunities to our Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy community. Co-moderating tonight's panel with me will be Emily Musing. Emily is an 83 graduate of the University of Toronto and our recently appointed Leader in Residence. As the former Vice President, Clinical, and Chief Patient Safety Officer at the University Health Network, Emily has worked tirelessly to improve the care of patients in some of Canada's leading academic hospitals and is one of Canada's leaders in pharmacy. Emily, over to you.
Thank you, Zubin. So tonight's topic will explore the myths, realities, and opportunities of independent ownership in pharmacy. From chain store competition to building community relationships and the pros and cons of really being your own boss. Our panel will provide a very practical look at both the rewarding and at times challenging career path that they've chosen. What we're going to do is have a roundtable discussion with our panelists, followed by a Q&A period. And we encourage you throughout this to add your questions in the YouTube chat. So I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. First, Chris Wong is a 1T5 PharmD grad. Chris's belief in empowering patients through education to take control of their own health has contributed to his co-ownership of two independent pharmacies, namely the Victoria Park Pharmacy and the Surrey Victoria Park Pharmacy. Second, Kristen Watt is a 1T0 grad. Her desire to apply the clinical skills she learned during her time at the faculty inspired her to open Kristen's Pharmacy, where she can reach the community both through face-to-face interactions as well as through her very successful social media channels. Nav Thiara is the Senior National Manager, Healthcare Professionals, Pharmacy Group, Commercial Banking for the National Bank. Nav has 9 years of professional banking experience that enables him to help aspiring independent owners set up their own successful businesses. Scott Coulter, BSc Pharm 93, is the owner of Coulter's Pharmacy and Home Health Care. His family-owned independent pharmacy is celebrating 50 years in 2023. So we want to congratulate Scott and his family on that. And finally, last but not least, Shannon Fry is BSc 0T5 is a co-owner of Thornbury Pharmasave, an independent franchise. And this gives Shannon the flexibility to be present for her family, have the resources to run a successful business, and also to enjoy the perks of being her own boss. So welcome, everyone. And Zubin's going to start us off with our first question.
Thank you, Emily. So let's get started with our panel. All of you are independent community pharmacists, but you've all had different career trajectories that brought you to where you are today. None of you had a straight line straight out of school into community pharmacy ownership. So let's find out a little bit about your own experiences and how they helped you to become the pharmacist you are today. Let's start with you, Chris.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So for my story, I graduated at U of T in 2018. And then what happened in 2018 was that I had the opportunity to be a co-owner. So what happened was there was a retiring pharmacist, an independent owner. And then he was retiring, he was looking for someone to take over. And I heard of this opportunity. So I reached out and I met the guy, and that's basically it. So
what were you doing for the first 3 years after you graduated, Chris?
Oh, yeah. So when I first graduated, I was a full-time hospital pharmacist. And even today, I'm still a part-time hospital pharmacist. So in 2018, what happened was I stepped down from a full-time hospital position and I started the independent business, just learning. I had no idea what was going on, but fortunately, I had a partner with me. So for half the week, I would work by independent pharmacy. And for the rest of the week, I would be at the a hospital, either Norfolk General Hospital or at Mackenzie Health in Richmond Hill. And that's what I've been doing for the last few years. And then recently, last year, I started my second independent pharmacy as well. And I've been just really enjoying this independent aspect, on top of the hospital aspect.
So you've been a hospital pharmacist, you still are a hospital pharmacist, you're an independent community pharmacy owner. How have these different experiences in practice shaped your philosophy of practice?
Oh, yeah, that's thank you so much for asking. So I think it's really neat that I saw perspectives from both sides, community and the hospital side. Because one of the biggest issues in the hospital setting is people just coming back to the hospital. They just keep coming back, sort of like a revolving door. And that could be fixed or improved by just being stronger on the community pharmacy front. Because there really is such a huge role for community pharmacies in the community, just to try to prevent these situations from happening through education, through advocating patient health, things like that. And especially, I think during COVID, I think we can all see there's such a huge role for community pharmacy in general. So it's just really neat to see what the things we can improve on from both sides and just trying to be that bridge for patients.
Yeah, bridge being the theme of your background as well tonight. Certainly, it's and we sometimes think of pharmacy as being these two distinct silos. Hospital pharmacists and community pharmacists are different species, but you are a great example of somebody who's managed to have feet in both worlds and benefit, and most importantly, your patients benefit from that experience. Thank you, Chris. Kristen, over to you. Tell us a little bit about your career trajectory and how you ended up where you are today.
Thanks, Zubin. So I started after U of T in community pharmacy right away. I was working in a variety of different community pharmacies doing relief, and I moved into a small community pharmacy as management, and I enjoyed it very much. However, wasn't clinically challenged in that particular location, either by my own limitations, because I didn't know how necessarily to apply all my clinical knowledge, or by the location itself, because it was really small. It was not busy at all. So from there, I actually moved into a large chain as an associate for a period of time. And while I enjoyed some of the aspects of being able to manage some parts of the business, I still wasn't finding the clinical aspect that I was looking for. From there, I went to long-term care. I became a clinical consultant pharmacist for long-term care. I had 9 long-term care homes, and I did that for about 4 years. I enjoyed that very much. I found that it was a really great opportunity to help me hone my clinical skills, to pick a particular antidepressant from all of the antidepressants out there, and practicing in that way, being able to really suggest good therapeutics for our patients. However, I missed working directly with the patients, because in a long-term care home, you don't have a lot of contact with your patients. So I decided to meld everything I had done into one, and I had identified a location during my practice as a consultant pharmacist that would benefit from a really small, dedicated, community, clinically focused pharmacy. I had a number of the physicians in the area say, "Oh, please, can you practice in this? Because we've seen what you've done for our patients here, and we'd love you to do that for our community." And so I opened Kristen's Pharmacy in 2017 and really made it into a center of clinical pharmacy services. I have a dispensary, of course, in the pharmacy. However, I have an entire technical team that runs that for me, including 2 remote technicians who do all our data entry, technicians who do all our checking in our pharmacy. And now we run it as a clinical-based pharmacy where I work in an office every day consulting with our patients.
Yeah, so obviously your passion for a more clinical, patient-oriented kind of pharmacy practice comes through quite a bit. Can you maybe help our audience understand how you used that passion, that philosophy, as your springboard to ownership? A lot of people sometimes think, "Oh, all I want to do is patient care. I can't be bothered owning a pharmacy."
It's true. It's definitely 2 separate roles in one location. However, the role that I wanted didn't exist. So I used this springboard to create the role that I wanted. I do believe something similar to this. I don't have enough hubris to think my model is the future of pharmacy, but I think something similar to this will be the future of pharmacy, in that the pharmacists are really going to be utilized for their clinical knowledge, and we're going to maximize our technical teams for the technical functions. So that springboard came from, it just wasn't out there yet, and I wanted to make what I wanted, so I did.
Yep. Making your own opportunities. I love it. Thank you, Kristen. We'll move on then to the grand old man of the panel. That's Scott Coulter. So Scott, tell us about your trajectory as an independent community pharmacist.
Thanks, Zubin. And you graduated before I did. Just
I'm the grander, older man on the.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not the oldest one here. I'm just the oldest one on the panel. Thank you very much. So second generation pharmacist. So I kind of literally fell into it through my family situation. But interestingly enough, I was not the pharmacist child that worked in the family business and got to understand the pharmacy business from a young age. I actually had no interest and spent no time working in the family business until it came time to decide what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And my
prodigal son.
My high school guidance counselor said, well, you're really good in math and science. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? And I looked at it and I said, well, pharmacy is a nice combination of the two. So I came home from school one day and basically at the dinner table told my parents that, oh, by the way, I've applied to pharmacy school, which caught them both quite off guard. So at that time, Dad and his partner bought the business in 1973. And in 1989, when I was going off to U of T, my dad's partner was 10 years his senior and had made the decision that he was ready to retire. With my news that I was going to U of T to pharmacy school, Mom and Dad made the decision to buy the partner out, continue the family business for the 4 years that I was at U of T. And then upon my graduation, the master plan, as often never happens, was for me to go learn the pharmacy business from somebody else, bring that experience and knowledge and expertise back to the family business and grow the family business from there. Unfortunately, it was a time we go through a roller coaster of availability of pharmacists. Sometimes there's lots of pharmacists available and sometimes there's not very many pharmacists available. And while I was going to U of T, my dad was working 70 plus hours a week, basically by himself, running the pharmacy with whatever support and assistance he could get. So when I graduated, the right thing to do, and I truly believe I couldn't have learned the business from anyone better than my father. I consider him my most influential mentor in my personal and professional career, for sure. So I came back to work the family business for 5 years, and very quietly in 1998, I bought the business from my parents. At that point, I was already running the day-to-day operations as a store manager, and even my staff weren't aware that, in fact, the business had changed hands. In 2000, my father retired, and we've carried on since then.
Great. And that whole tradition of sort of continuity in family-run pharmacies is such an important part of not just our history of pharmacy in Ontario, but our present, as you've pointed out. So having grown up in the business, how has your philosophy of practice evolved through the various stages of being an employee pharmacist and now an owner?
Well, I think it took that first 5 years before people called and actually asked to speak to me after asking for my dad. And so I'm quite proud of that opportunity. And I'm quite proud that I'm at a point in my practice now where my patients are calling and asking for my staff pharmacists, and they don't have to speak to me because I have such a great team and we've put together quite an operation that there's trust and my patients trust the advice and the education and abilities of my entire team. But I have to admit, I don't think I could work for somebody else. And I mean, today for sure, but even as much as 20 years ago, my need for the flexibility, the responsiveness to be able to make decisions without having to wait for powers to be, to agree, to meet, to consult shareholders to make an understanding. I want to be able to be as responsive to my patients' needs and my staff's needs as possible. And COVID was a great example of that because when COVID started, community pharmacy was there. We were open. We were one of the only places where people could find healthcare readily without, an appointment or a Zoom or whatever. And I take great responsibility, taking care of my patients, but also taking care of my staff. But I also appreciated the ability it gave me to make decisions that were in mine, my patients, or my staff's best interest. And so things like choosing not to do COVID testing, because that was a concern to my staff and a concern to some of my patients, and to figure out how to do additional expanded scope of practice opportunities, but still understanding that there was a minimum level of quality and care that had to be provided on a day-to-day basis. And 3 years in, I can honestly say I still see my competition stumbling in the understanding being able to provide the key day-to-day responsibilities of pharmacy for chasing after the carrot.
And certainly like a common theme emerging from all of our panelists so far is this idea of being able to practice pharmacy the way you want to practice pharmacy based on your clinical judgment, your interests, your clinical skills. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Scott. Finally, over to Shannon. Tell us a little bit about your voyage into independent pharmacy ownership, Shannon.
Sure. Actually, a little bit begrudgingly, to be honest, at first. So I'm a case study in never say never. So my parents owned their own business, not pharmacy related. So I was used to entrepreneurship and the late night calls and the stress. They had a home office, so we would get calls throughout the night, and I saw that side of it, and having employees and being there for them. So I thought it was something that I never wanted to do. I live in a small rural area, and I was quite happy to work as a student in the dispensary after my first year of university. Hadn't been in pharmacy yet, but that was the goal. So I kept at it and loved my position in the community pharmacy, and then finally got into pharmacy school and tried on different roles throughout the summers. I worked at Sick Kids, I worked at Toronto Rehab, and a corporate store, just to see where things fit for me. I love rural community pharmacy. And so my now husband and I decided to move back to our hometown upon graduation and work as a staff pharmacist. I was quite happy to do so. And I actually thought, as a new grad, that a lot of times competing interests between owning and being a good pharmacist. So the previous owner knew that. He knew that I wasn't interested in owning on my own. So kind of 2009 rolls around. I'm hiding the fact that I'm pregnant from him. He's hiding the fact that he's got the store for sale from me. So it was an interesting time for sure. Yeah, exactly. Because he knew I wasn't interested initially. So within Pharmasave, there's an opportunity for first right of refusal for other members, and two gentlemen that own the pharmacy in a neighboring town showed interest in buying the store. I was the face of the store, so they approached me about a partnership, equal partnership between the three of us. And that was 13 years ago, and we haven't looked back. It was one of the best decisions I've made.
So you gave birth to two babies at once, it sounds like.
I did, yeah. It all happened when I was 6 months pregnant, 3 months of owning, and then went off from maternity leave for 6 months, which was my initial intention anyway. So it's been fantastic. My two partners, one is 10 years older than I am. The other is 10 years older than he is. So it's a really nice succession plan. And it's great to have the mentorship available, but also, make decisions on my own as I need to. Yeah.
And it's such interesting stories, all and these different trajectories to where you are now. How has your experience shaped your philosophy of practice and your ability to actually implement your view of what a pharmacist should be in a community?
Yeah, so I really enjoy the fact that I am in my store, in my pharmacy, 4, 5, 6 days a week. And we can see patients. We, especially through COVID, to be that point of contact for people to see that, Mrs. Smith doesn't look so great today. What's going on with her, right? And we just have that ability to be an accessible daily, weekly part of our patients' lives. Yeah.
And again, a very common theme across all four of you, that real desire to be in your community, of your community, the eyes of your community, and a trusted, accessible place people can go to for when they need healthcare. It's great having met all of you, and I'm going to now turn you over to Emily to continue the questions. Emily.
So first of all, thank you everyone for sharing these stories. I mean, it just really brings it home to us how different trajectories and different journeys can end in some really successful independent pharmacies. So I have to say though, in listening to all of you, I'm in awe. And I think I, like perhaps many pharmacists out there, may be looking at the idea of owning and operating a business, running a practice, putting everything on the line the way that each of you have done, to seem pretty daunting and perhaps scary. So I guess my question to you is, how did you manage these fears, these doubts in taking the step? Because it is a pretty big step. And maybe what I'll do is I'll ask each of you to answer in the opposite way that Zubin asked to start. So we're going to start with Shannon.
Okay, well, when I figure out how to manage the fears 13 years later, I'll let you know, because it's unending. But the good part is that we ultimately have control as owners. So if that's something that you want, then independent ownership is for you, certainly. Being that I was, 4 or 5 months pregnant when I bought in, I had a family to think about, I had my future to think about, and it just made the most sense to me. I certainly tried on different decisions, so to speak, what it would look like to be the manager of the store without being an owner, whether I wanted to go in a different direction. So I think you kind of have to try on different decisions and see how that feels. And ultimately, the one I chose felt the best and continues to do so. Also gather data, talk to your classmates. It's such a great time to be an owner because we have each other. We're in lots of WhatsApp chat groups with each other, and classmates are a great source of information as well. So just use the people around you as mentors and to bounce ideas off of one another.
Thanks, Shannon. I think that our audience probably are really appreciative of those very practical suggestions and those words of encouragement. And what I'm hearing is that really it's a very personal decision. That's what I'm hearing from all of you in talking about your journeys. I'm going to move on and ask Scott, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, absolutely. You need your peer group for sure. You need sounding boards. The most important thing for me was finding and developing a trusted group of advisors and supporters. We don't have the freedom or flexibility to have a bad quarter and have some other part of a corporation bail us out. The financial responsibilities and implications of what we do is profound, because at the end of the day, it's us. It ends with us and whoever we have as our financial supports. So you really need those experts, and you need those experts in the process of buying and owning and beginning the journey as an owner, but you need those experts to carry you through that. An accountant, a lawyer, a banker, the accountant especially, the people that can advise you about all those things as an entrepreneur, not even in pharmacy, but simply any business, to advise you about appropriate decision-making processes for government, red tape, taxes, and then HR. I can't diminish the challenges, the challenges of HR, and having an HR. They say in HR, to have an HR person in your company, you need to be the size of about 50 people. Most pharmacies don't have that luxury, but there's some phenomenal HR consultants out there that you pay as you go, and you get what you pay for. You need to invest in your business and pay these experts to give you what you can't necessarily always take care of yourself. And then things like loss prevention, marketing, merchandising, and the buying power, that can come from considering a buying group or a banner organization. The ability to network and group as like-minded pharmacy owners and take advantages of some of those opportunities, the synergies that you get from multiple stores, but only still being an independent owner. And then, like mentors, my father, obviously, my wife's a pharmacist in a completely different capacity in community pharmacy, but dinner table conversations are still about pharmacy. So
I like to be around that table.
Not all.
I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are also thinking, that sounds wonderful that you can get that gathered, that support group. How do you find that support group? I guess that's a question. Was it mainly through other community pharmacy owners, or how did you? Yeah.
Absolutely. Networking is one of the most important things I've done for my business is network, belonging to business networking groups and meeting other entrepreneurs in other industries, and developing relationships, and then being able to trust them and I mean, I'm a sounding board for them, they're a sounding board for me. It really is kind of like a business incubator group where we come from very different industries, but we often share a lot of the same challenges, especially when massive change comes about, like COVID or government regulation or anything like that. But you really need your mentorship. You need your close-knit support group to be able to get good advice when you need it.
Sounds like wise words, Scott. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there taking notes as we speak. I'm going to move on to Kristen. Ask you the same question with regards to how did you deal with your fears, doubts moving into this area?
Absolutely. So I had worked in pharmacy for 17 years before I opened my pharmacy, right throughout high school and all throughout pharmacy school, et cetera. So I had that background experience and 7 years as a pharmacist before I opened. So I was really confident at the time that I decided to open that this is the way I wanted to practice, because I had done a variety of other things already. I understood the clinical background. I had worked in community, and I saw that there was a way. So going from graduating to opening, I probably wouldn't have been able to manage those fears, and I probably wouldn't have been as successful. So giving myself that grace and time, knowing you want to get into ownership is great, but give yourself the grace and time to grow into being ready for that role, because it's not something that comes on day one. And then we cashed in our retirement savings. I had a 1-year-old on the day I opened. And so there was a lot of grace and kindness in my own home, with my husband supporting me as we did this and sacrificed everything. But the reason that I wasn't scared was because at the end of the day, I still had my license. So if it crashed and burned and failed miserably, I was still a pharmacist, and that nothing can take that away from me. So I still have the earning capacity. I still have the ability to provide care. I still have the professionalism and I knew that the next day I was still hireable. So if I had that to fall back on, and we all do, and we can never forget that, because we work so hard to earn that we must remember that is our safety net, and we can use that as we need to. Yeah, I probably would have had a lot more debt because I had to do all that investing. But when you graduate from pharmacy school, you are very used to that. So you just get used to those numbers, no matter what they look like. And you know that eventually at some point, you'll get beyond that point. So never forget that we have that power and that ability, because we have those letters after our name, and we've earned them.
And I think you make some really, really strong points there that people need to think about, which is, that concept of giving yourself that grace and time. Many people may think about something and they think, oh, tomorrow I have to suddenly open up my own pharmacy and make it a success and be, the top pharmacy within the province, the city, et cetera. I think it's really important that what we're hearing from all of you is that there are steps along the way, whether it's through your own experience or through your work with others, through mentorship that you've received, through linking with partners, whether it's partners in business or supportive partners in finance, etc. I think that there are many ways to get there, and it's really just a matter of you choosing that this is what you want to do. I'm going to jump to Chris now and say, what's your thoughts with regards to this question?
Yeah, so like the previous speakers, I totally agree. You need a very strong support group. Accountants, a lawyer, family, friends. So just like Kristen, I thought about like the worst case scenario. And at the time, I was only 3 years into practice. It's not like I worked for too long too. I had no idea about what's going on in the business world or independent pharmacy world. Now, that being said, I was always working as a relief pharmacist just on a weekend here and there, still throughout my 3 years in hospital pharmacy. But I really didn't have much experience. But with a strong support group, and when I heard the opportunity, I thought about it. And my parents could potentially pay off the loan to help me out, because it's scary. You're going to the bank, and I don't know if this is going to work out. And just knowing that if things don't work out, I can always try to find out a full-time job as in the hospital setting or just switch career paths. And I just really thought that if I'm going to take some risks, do it earlier. It's do it now before I have more responsibilities, to things to worry about. So that was one of the biggest factors. And also my mentality was that it is a business. Like even if you put in the best effort, the best energy, time, all that stuff, the research, it might not work out. And it's just how business is. And if it's that easy, it wouldn't be as rewarding. So that was my mentality the whole time. So really just to enjoy the journey, take it day by day. And you might not make it to the goal that you want it to be at the end. But if you enjoy your journey day by day, you're going to really find the journey very fruitful, regardless of how the business does. Because even if it doesn't work out, I can get this knowledge and use this towards maybe a second pharmacy or something else in the future. There's always something out there. In that case, when you think like that, it's always gains. And then finally, it's another thing is that I want to do independent pharmacy because I was a bit stubborn. I didn't like the way community pharmacy, some of them are being ran, where they value, I believe, money over patients. So when as Scott mentioned, being an owner gives you the flexibility to practice the way you want. And I really wanted to practice in a way and show the world that if you value patients, then money will come after. Take care of your patients today, and then they might come back the next time. And then over time, you can build up your patients and your community. And I think just having the different priorities really can develop your pharmacy independent career.
And I really appreciate each of you in being very upfront and talking about the risks that you thought about, that, you didn't go into this blind. You did take time to think about and worry about, what could be the ramifications if there is failure. But I also see very strongly in each one of you that entrepreneurial spirit and that real wish to make a difference to your patients. And I think that's what really carries you through. I think some of those first days when, you're not sure exactly how it's going to go, and perhaps success is not, in the forefront of, what you see in the future. So this is great. Thank you. Zubin.
Thank you very much. So the next question is for Kristen and Shannon. As we know, pharmacy has for a while been a female-dominated profession, yet proportionately, we know that there are far fewer women who own and operate their own pharmacies than men. Both of you, Kristen and Shannon, you were both young mothers at the time that you started on this pathway. What kind of advice do you have for women who might be thinking about pharmacy ownership as a possibility? And from your experience of having to juggle young families and family responsibilities, what sort of experiences would you like to share with women in the audience tonight who might be thinking about this? Let's start with Kristen.
Thanks. So I never really considered the gender aspect of my ownership until I was in the building that was being built for me. And I was talking to the gentleman who was going to be doing the flooring, and the electrician showed up and walked over to the gentleman and shook his hand first. And I came to the realization that I was seen second as a woman. I've also learned that men are confident, women are assertive or aggressive. And I've become unapologetic for that because I am fairly confident in generally in what I talk about. I know what I don't know, and I think that's really important. So when I do speak, it's because I probably feel like I have something to contribute. And we women often apologize for that. We pharmacists also apologize for that. So we have a double whammy there. And so I have decided to position myself as, no, I know this, and I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to be deferential. I will be kind. I will be considerate, but I am sure of myself. And that's how I present myself professionally. Managing all of the things as a woman, every woman out there, whether you're a community pharmacist, a hospital pharmacist, an owner or whatnot, we know that there are spinning plates. Most of them are on fire, and it doesn't matter if you have a spouse or not. Your kids will walk past them to you to ask for a snack in the middle of that firestorm. So we seem to be able to multitask incredibly well, but that lends itself to our success. Quite honestly, I had 4 computer screens going in my office today. I was running the hockey trainers, the webinar that I had to take to become a hockey trainer for my son. Well, I have two screens doing prescriptions, and it's all going because that's what we are capable of doing. So if you're, as a woman, thinking about doing it and wondering how you can manage it, you already can. I have no doubt in my mind that you can. And the gender and all of the gender roles and norms shouldn't be what holds you back. My husband is the one who stayed home for both of the parental leaves. I went back to work after 1 month with both my kids. And I'm really happy to say, actually, I had my husband retire, quit his job recently because we weren't coping with all of the demands that were on me. And we made the decision that it was best that I focus on my work and career and supporting the family, and he supports me from the background at home. So there are ways and opportunities that it can be done. We're so used to those traditional gender norms, and we have to be willing and able to just break free of them, and disregard the outside input and influence. You have to do what's right for you. Jump into that ownership if you want to, and know, again, that you can jump out or step back and hire when you need to, and all of those other things. There is supports around you. If you have them, you build those networks. Like Scott said, you have the mentorships and all of those things, but don't let gender norms be the reason that you don't consider doing this, because women do have a lot of power in these roles.
Inspirational words. Thank you, Kristen. Shannon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was smiling along, Kristen. A funny little anecdote. In the dispensary, we're on display all the time, right? And it is female dominated. So, a few times we've had some men come in and say, oh, look at all these lovely ladies behind the counter, and you think, would they ever say that if it was a bunch of men? And my quip back is always, and they're smart too. Just do it. You're absolutely, as Kristen said, you're capable. I am a small framed person. I'm 5'1". I do not look the part at all, but I definitely am making it work. I also want to say, you want to choose your circle too, of the people that are around you and are about female empowerment. I've never felt less than a celebrated member of our banner group, which is Pharmasave. It's a culture that is conducive to female ownership. And that's important, because I would leave that type of circle if it wasn't the case. So that's really important if you're looking at different banner groups or corporations to be involved with. There are good ones out there, so make sure you surround yourself with those good people. Zubin, you talked about juggling in the question, and sometimes we do have to remind ourselves that it is juggling, and not all of the balls have to be in the air at the same time. So sometimes as we're juggling them, one just has to be put aside. That's why my background is blurred right now. You don't need to see my house, because right now that ball has been put over here because I've just worked 12 days straight. And that's fine, right? Have a day off on Thursday and I'll get to it. So we may be able to have it all, just not necessarily at the same time. So give yourself some grace with that, and lean on your circle. Sometimes I lean on my staff. They've picked my kids up from school when I can't leave. And then we leave on our village and our circle of family and friends as well. I too didn't take a full year's maternity leave. People would ask who was with the children, and I would say, my husband. He's not babysitting, he's parenting. So yeah, just lean on those other people around you. Yeah.
Thank you both. Some really, really inspirational and interesting insights for our audience. Thank you. Emily, back to you.
And I would just say also, what you experienced in your practice happens elsewhere as well. I experienced very similar things in the hospital sector. So good for you. And I hope that the audience out there listening to this are inspired to go out there as women and take on this mantle as a leader within independent pharmacy. So far, we've really listened to a variety of our speakers talk about their experience as pharmacist owners. Now I'm going to pick on Nav. So you bring a very different perspective that I think is going to be really interesting to our audiences, because one of the most important issues an owner faces is, of course, the question of finance and money. So Nav, reflecting on the experiences you've now heard from our panelists, and as a person who helps pharmacists achieve their dreams to own their own pharmacy, what advice would you give our audience members with regards to how they can prepare to be successful as an owner?
Certainly. Well, thank you, first of all. And I would start with the main thing, most important one is start small to get big. And the main important thing is have the experience in the industry. Work with existing pharmacists, work with someone you know or whether you don't know when you start out small. That's where you get the experience. Be in a public facing role. You will understand insides of the business. You will understand what actually draws customers in. That will first, another thing is mainly understanding the business, understanding the clientele, understanding the neighborhood, and have all those things in there. Once you have the experience, banks generally tend to look for about 2 years at bare minimum before any of the individual wanted to go ahead and carry on their pharmacy by themselves or being an independent owner. And the second thing, most important, as Scott mentioned a few times in his speech over here today, was to have the professionals looking after the things, such as the accountants, right? So that's most important, because they are the ones who's going to help you understand your business, who's going to help you understand your numbers, who's going to help you to grow your business. So if you have those two in line, and having the networking with bank special programs, and do not hesitate to reach out to the banks to ask the questions. There's no such a thing called a silly question. If you don't ask, you wouldn't know, because there's so many things that we can go ahead and offer our clients. And every pharmacist should remember, every person who works in a bank as a specialist or the accounts manager or the manager, we are working by your side, and we're going to be with you to make sure your things are getting approved at the bank. So again, be experienced, have good credit. That's another key thing as well. When you're applying for the financing, make sure to have good credit and the understanding how the credit works. What does the bank look at? So those are a few key things that can make you from start slow to high pace, as well as the most, I'd say, profitable pharmacy owner.
So thanks for that insight. I'm sure it's really important to have your ducks in a row when you go to the bank, so that it makes it easy for the bank to say yes. And I'm sure a lot of our audience are going to want to call you, Nav, and get you to help them through that process. Zubin.
Thanks, Emily. So all of our panelists have spoken about one of the things that really drove their interest in independent pharmacy ownership, is the idea of being part of a community, embedded in a community, growing with their community. Scott, you've had a particularly interesting experience, having grown up in pharmacy and then taking over the operation yourself. And in the years that you've been an owner, you've developed some pretty unique relationships within your community of London, Ontario, in particular, for example, with the Better Business Bureau. Can you tell us a little bit about that particular experience and sort of the things that independent community pharmacy ownership can do for you as an individual in helping you reach out more broadly than pharmacy across your community?
Oh, absolutely. So I inherited the BBB membership. My dad had done it. And the way I kind of looked at it was, in my young days, it would be like the good housekeeping seal of approval. And then in today's environment, it's more of the Google review. What the Better Business Bureau, and it doesn't necessarily, like how it aligns with pharmacy is a bit of an anomaly, or not really. One would think it shouldn't be necessary, but at the same time, I use it in the sense that it is my ability to market, if nothing else, a marketing tool to say, hey, you can trust us. We want your loyal business. We want your to take care of your health, but it's because we have committed to a certain standard of operations. And really the BBB, I mean, if you're looking for a roofer, if you're looking for a plumber, you're looking for an electrician, I get it. Why so much with a pharmacy? Well, I say, why not? Because it is my willingness to put my reputation and my business on the line and say, I'm prepared to live up to these expectations. And as such, you can trust me to do it right. And if it's not right, you can trust me to fix it. Just like you would say a roofer or anything along those lines. I I branched into the home healthcare part of pharmacy in 2010 when I expanded my existing building. And really what I did was dabble in home healthcare, but really started to learn the opportunity, the need, and what it can do for my practice of pharmacy. What I quickly learned when I opened my home healthcare department, first of all, to get to my home healthcare business in my pharmacy, you got to walk by my dispensary. That was done on purpose. What was one of the biggest eye openers for me as soon as I did it was how many of my existing pharmacy clients, my existing pharmacy patients, were using home healthcare services from elsewhere. And then all of a sudden it was, oh, look what Scott now offers me. So I did that for 10 years and realized that I was really only still dabbling in the business. And that's when 2 years ago, I got in with both feet and bought a full service mobility company to really feel like I could offer that segment of healthcare for the community of London as a whole. And it's been nothing but extremely rewarding since, to really be able to, we literally refer paid customers from one location to the other multiple times per day, because I've decided to segregate what we do best in each location.
And again, that's that whole idea of being part of that community, whether it's through formal associations like the Better Business Bureau, or simply helping patients navigate an increasingly fragmented and irritating healthcare system by being able to do the kinds of things that your pharmacy is doing in home healthcare. Thanks, Scott. Back over to you, Emily.
It's great also to have that one-stop shopping for your clients too, so they don't have to go to so many different places. So prior to my recent retirement, I worked my whole career in hospital pharmacy. So Chris, I'm going to pick your brains here on behalf of other people in the audience who may be still in hospital pharmacy, but thinking of taking that, radical career change. And the question is, you have been in hospital pharmacy. You also worked in geriatric pharmacy before becoming a co-owner of Victoria Park Pharmacy. So what was the transition and experience like for you to make that change? And I know you're still dabbling in both, feet in both sides, but what were the factors that enabled you to take this step and change in your career?
Yeah, so I still remember the day when I told my hospital coworkers, oh, by the way, guys, I'm going to leave this full-time job. I'm going to do my own pharmacy. I told them at lunch, and then it was a pretty silent conversation. I remember people were just staring at me like, what are you talking about? But you know what? Like hospital pharmacy is very rewarding. You're there when the patients are the sickest, and you can really do a lot of good. But I think most of actually every owner will agree with me that it's just totally different. That feeling of reward when you're growing your own business, and day by day you put in the work, your time, energy, and there's just so much pride. It's very beautiful. So it's a totally different sense of reward, and that's something that really drawn me to it. And one of the factors that allow me to be more confident is just knowing that there's going to be a partner there at the independent pharmacy. So there's someone there I can learn from, and also to split the stress, because it is very tough mentally and also physically to be a sole owner. It's very difficult. It's doable, but it's just you're never really off. Like when you close your store, there's still stuff to do at home, and the stress stays. So it's
I see a lot of nods there from our other panelists.
Yeah, exactly. So, the days when I'm at the hospital or when I'm off, I have a lot of a peace in my mind, because I know there's another owner. My co-owner is there. He's taking care of things. I don't have to worry about anything. I know he has the pharmacy's best interest. And then the second thing is also just before you doing the independent pharmacy stuff, if you're currently a hospital pharmacist, is to actually work at a community pharmacy or an independent pharmacy. Just do something, because I really do think if you're going to be in any business, you have to believe in your product or service. So if you never worked in one, like it's very hard to be successful in it, because you don't really know what you're selling. And that is really just good patient community care. And then finally, I would also say just have confidence, because U of T and Waterloo, both universities, do a very good job at preparing you for these situations. You might not realize it, but they really train you well on your problem-solving skills, your critical thinking skills. And these things, they translate. After you graduate, it might not be about pharmacology anymore, but when you pick up that, when you meet your accountant, meet your lawyer, and then they teach you stuff, you pick up things and you will learn. You just need to put in the effort. And so I think everyone is very capable of handling their own independent business. They have the right support group. if they put in time and energy. And then for the financial stuff, as other panelists mentioned, it is very important to have this conversation with your local bank, the healthcare loan specialist, just to see what the options are. And they will make things work. They will see what is best for your financial situation. So don't worry about that stuff. Just worry about your mentality, and also how you can divide things up physically. Are you going to be working there full-time, part-time? Are you going to have a partner? Things like that.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And thanks for mentioning the both universities. I think you just made Zubin's heart warm, as did every other professor that may be here listening to us tonight. So, Zubin,
Indeed you did. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, no worries.
So our audience that's attending tonight's event is pretty interested in the idea of independent pharmacy ownership, but many people may simply be uncertain of how to start. In listening to your trajectories and your stories, they might think, well, the way to start is to have a father who owns a pharmacy, or following Shannon's cue, maybe you have to be 6 months pregnant and then you can own a community pharmacy. For most people, however, if they're thinking about starting, what advice would you give people in terms of the steps, the things they should think about, and just how to get started to move forward in a confident way towards pharmacy ownership? Let's start with you, Scott.
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Saving the best for last.
Independent pharmacy can take so many different shapes and sizes and opportunities, and you can make it what you want it to be. Someone who's looking at a green site opening where they're going to start from scratch, I kudos. Sleepless nights, a lot of stress. I can understand how that works. I'm more intrigued with the evolution or legacy development of a practice. Myself, for example, both of my children have taken their professional careers in new directions that are not pharmacy related. So I know that at this point, there's not going to be a third generation of Coulter's Pharmacy. So then I have to, as the potential mentor opportunity, there'll be a time when I'm looking for someone who wants to be vested in my business and potentially take that business forward after me. And the legacy of that business is very important to me. That's my family name on that door. And I've come to realize that regardless of what color the building is or what banner might be associated with it, once I understood that it was my family name and me and my staff being inside the building, that's what the reason that my clients and my patients come to me, I'm going to put a lot of time and effort into finding the right group of individuals or individuals who want to take my business and go further with it. My father often reflects and says, I spend too much time working in my business and not enough time working on my business. So I've learned to balance that portion of it, to understand the importance of networking and the importance of, growing and learning new opportunities and new business opportunities to bring that knowledge and experience back to the business. And I'll be looking for the legacy. I'm not necessarily, I've been around long enough. I've seen how independent pharmacy transition, say, into a corporate or semi-corporate environment can be very financially successful for the selling party. But it's really unfortunate to see sometimes what comes of the business or the pharmacy professionally afterwards. Those of us who will be looking to get out of the profession at the appropriate time will feel strongly about the legacy and what we want to leave behind and for the next generation to take forward. And I will put a lot of time and energy in finding the right people to take my business to the next level, because certainly I've done a lot with it since my dad did it. But I know that there's still additional opportunity and potential to take it even further. And that would be great benefit to me to see that happen after I'm done.
Yeah, and what a great way of sort of framing it for people who are thinking of starting out. The idea of mentorship, of finding somebody like you who's equally committed in terms of legacy and really wants to help whoever is just starting out succeed.
Yeah,
not just for them.
I don't want to work 6 days a week anymore.
Yeah, fair. Thank you, Scott. Kristen, what's your advice to somebody who is thinking about taking that big step that you took a few years ago?
Go slow and do your research. I opened a greenfield store. And so finding the right location, I think, was very key to my success, understanding the needs of the community. So I went back to the physicians, as I mentioned earlier, and understood what they were hoping they could see from a community pharmacy for their patients. And I really think that was instrumental in our success because it drives patient interactions. And at the beginning, it just drove people into the pharmacy. And then understanding your reputation and your legacy in the town. Our name is everything. Funny story. I have small children and asked them one day if they're going to follow my footsteps. Hopefully, Scott, they will. And mentioned to my 6-year-old, someday you could have it and it could be called Leo's Pharmacy. And he said, wait, is it called Kristen's Pharmacy? So our name is everything. And it really does matter. Like Scott said, it's your name on the door. And so your integrity in that town. So understanding what you're projecting and following through on what you're saying that you can do. If you market yourselves as being able to offer a service, then be able to offer that service. Understand you can always pivot. You can always change your mind. But really important before you take those steps and commit to doing things is making sure you'll be able to follow through and building those relationships in your town to be able to really service the patients who could benefit from you. I think relationship building is everything in our industry. We're often marketed as the most accessible healthcare professional, and I'm trying to pull us back a little bit because it's really hard to manage every single person who walks through the door, but I am still an accessible pharmacist. It's just maybe not exactly when the patients need it. It's going to be on my time and on my schedule, but still being available to them. I think that's what they love. They know if they call and request a call back, we have integrity, we're going to do that. So all of those little things really add up over time.
Very, very practical suggestions. Thank you, Kristen. Shannon, what's your advice for our audience for how to get started?
Yeah, I think it's know your audience and also know yourself. So a few years into ownership, I worked with a business coach. And it was a 360 checkpoint on my business, on my relationships with the staff, and a lot of work on myself. And it was hard, but necessary for growth. And it just made everything better. It's good to know your strengths. And it's also good to know that your blind spots and your weaknesses, and that then those are the people that you need to bring in to your business as staff members, as partners, as mentors, so that they can check you on your blind spots for sure. So if you can do that before you're an owner, that's fantastic as well, because it's important in anything. But as Kristen said, when it's your name on the door, it's your integrity, and you have to know that you're in it for the right reasons. That's for sure.
Excellent advice. I'm struck by how all of you, like the first question we asked tonight had to do with your philosophy of practice, and many of you talked about the idea of independent ownership as a way of living your own philosophy of practice and connecting then that back to the integrity to follow up on your commitments, to practice in the way that you want to, but then also to be able to make sure that, as you say, your blind spots are checked, that you know yourself, and that's a really valuable first step in any kind of entrepreneurial process. Thank you. Chris, over to you.
All right. Yeah. So the first thing, as previously mentioned, work in a community independent pharmacy first. If you haven't done that yet, see if this is something you really enjoy, because you're hearing from us that we really enjoy it, but everyone's different. Just, you got to actually do it yourself. See if this is something that comes, is for you, because there is a lot of stress and responsibility and a lot of other things that we probably didn't mention today. They're just too much to talk about. So you really have to get your feet wet and just do it and see if this is something for you. And then really start networking. Just let people know, let your colleagues and friends know that independent pharmacy is something you're looking towards to. And let me know there's opportunities you hear about. People are retiring all the time. People are looking for partners to partner up with, things like that. So, and then just take a look at your local pharmacy realtors, see if their pharmacy is selling. Or if you're looking to start your own, just think about these things and be on the lookout for opportunities, because they really do just come by really fast and you have to hop on. There are people competing for offers all the time. So they don't give you months to decide. When it comes, it comes. So keep your mindset, be ready, and then just start networking. And also, I would let your parents or family know, friends, things like that, because it is so important to have the support group. Because once you start, it's going to be rough. Just being honest with you, it's the hours could be rough, the responsibility, the stress, all that. So you really need a healthy support group to pull you through it, especially the beginning. And once you get past that, then things get a lot better. And then, so once you find this opportunity, once you're mentally ready for it, physically ready for it, then it's time to, when the opportunity comes, find an accountant, find a trustworthy accountant, lawyer, and also go to your local bank to ask for the health care loan specialist. And then basically that's how it starts. And then don't worry too much about the technical aspect of the business side, things like that. You will be able to learn it. Once you get into it, you start learning things. People will teach you. And then you're also going to be doing readings. You're going to be researching yourself, see what other independent pharmacies are doing. You pick that up, no problem. You're well trained for it. You're smarter than you think.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. We're starting to get a lot of great questions into our audience Q&A, and so I would encourage you in the next few moments, if you have some questions for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A in the available to you to ask questions. We won't be able to get to all of the questions, but we're currently figuring out the questions we're seeing most frequently, and in a few moments we're going to be starting with the audience Q&A. But for now, let me turn it back to Emily for our last question for our panel. Emily.
Right. So we heard some really interesting things here, but I think while pharmacists often have connections with other pharmacists, the one area that we may not easily be able to get insight from is from the bank. And we have Nav here, so I can't let you go without asking for further detail. You talked a little bit about what are some things that pharmacists can do really to prep before that meeting with the bank. But can you go into a bit more detail with regards to, as a banker, what would you look for to have confidence in the bankability of a pharmacist that's interested in opening their pharmacy?
Great question. I mean, one of two things. First of all, one is opening up a new pharmacy. The other one is doing the acquisition of a pharmacy as a new owner. So two different things. If we are speaking specifically about a new owner as a startup pharmacy, most important key thing, as I said earlier as well, that you need to know the area, the surroundings where you're going to be opening that, because majority of your business is going to be coming from there. And the second is how good you know about your business and the accountant. So those are the three key factors. And then when it comes to the banking of getting any kind of financing approved, we definitely go ahead and take a look into your personal credit bureau to see exactly how you have maintained the credit in the past as well. And is it a risk to the bank? If it's not, that's the first step. And from there onwards, we look into the personal net worth. You should have some sort of savings in place. Not that we're going to be needing that. And it's just that bank looks into things that, God forbid, there's anything for the rainy days. Do they have some sort of savings that they could go ahead and inject into the corporation? We will be helping. We will be trying our best to go ahead and give you guys the loan and the operating credit so you can run your operation smoothly, right? So that's important. When it comes to the acquisition, things are different. Then we don't really rely on you as much we rely on the existing pharmacy that you're buying and the numbers that are on there. And there are some add backs that we can do to help to make sure that the ratios do match. The debt service coverage is the most important thing the bank actually looks into. Yes, there are certain times that we are okay to make an exception. Certain times, if the ratios are not in line and we have to make a little stretch, ask for an exception, that's when the personal net worth comes in. That's when the personal experience in the pharmacy sector that comes in, that, okay, this person has got X amount of numbers of years of experience, and they're okay to go ahead and operate this because they have worked in this industry in the past and they do know all the key information, what they need to do to get from point A to point B.
Great. Things are much clearer for me now. Not that I think a banker would want to give me money to open up an independent pharmacy tomorrow, but at least I know what the steps are. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass you to Zubin now.
Thank you very much. So we have been getting lots of questions from our audience, and thank you to our panelists for making our audience think and submit their questions. The first question is for Shannon and for Chris, actually. And the question from the audience member is, have you experienced situations where your vision for the business has actually differed from that of your co-owners? And how did you navigate that? Both Shannon and Chris have a sort of co-owner situation. So tell us a little bit about that. Maybe I'll start with you, Shannon.
Sure. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're different people. We have different ideas, and it's certainly happened in the past. There is a nice thing about having three of us because there's always a tiebreaker. But generally, we do come to some sort of mutual agreement that works out well for everyone. So it's knowing that there's going to be some tough questions sometimes. It's doing it, having those discussions professionally with courtesy. And we know, I trust my partners 100%. And that's what's important, is you have to know that they have the same values as you. They want the same thing out of the business for our employees, for our clients. And, you know, we can talk about the ins and outs of how to get there, but ultimately we have the same values. So sometimes you have to give a little, try on a different path than what you would have wanted at first. But that's why you have them to lean on.
So the idea of compromises to be expected along the way, but you need to have a foundation of trust, of goodwill between one another, and then it's simply about, not simply, but it's about communication. And be clear with that. Great, thank you. Chris, what are your thoughts about some of the unique challenges faced in a co-ownership situation?
So definitely, like if you're going to be in a partnership of some sort, you really have to pick the right person. So it is very similar to dating. That's how I see it. It's so important because you're pretty much probably going to be with this person or another or a few people for quite a few years, possibly until you retire. So you really have to have that trust, and the values have to align. And if that is true, then you will run into arguments. But at the end of the day, as you guys, you might have different opinions, but the goal is the same. So I rarely have that situation where we're completely opposite. It's usually just how we do things, but the goal is the same. Just how to improve the business. Now, for myself, because I only have one partner, we have a 50-50. So how it works for us is that if we both don't agree, then we don't go ahead with the decision. So that's just but we talked about that before we got into the business. Just what are the rules and how do we do things? But I have no issues with that because I know at the end of the day, my partner has the same interests I do. And to be honest with you, for the last 4 years, I have never had a situation where there were major conflicts. It's always, how can we improve the business? So when you have a partner with us and the same values, I don't see this being a problem at all.
Okay, great. Well, as the old saying goes, and going back to your dating analogy, marry in haste, repent at leisure. The idea of picking your partner well based on common values, common interests, common philosophy of pharmacy, doing some upfront negotiation. If we can't agree on something, we don't proceed. So that way it's clear sort of how decision making and disagreements might be navigated. And then good communication that's respectful and that is really aligned with your values seems to be a really, really important message for both of you. Thanks to you both. Over to Emily for the next question.
So, Kristen, when you were talking, you mentioned something that I think is really important, which is the relationship between a new pharmacy owner and the prescribers. And how do you develop that relationship? So I'd like to just take some time to explore that a little bit with each one of our panelists. You know, when you think about that, how would you, how would you seek out the prescribers in your area, and how do you build those relationships with them so that you have that connectivity? Maybe we'll just start with you, Kristen, since you introduced the topic, and then I'll ask some of the other panelists.
Sure. So I'm in a very rural part of Ontario. So I actually find it's a lot easier to develop those relationships here because there aren't as many prescribers as there may be in larger centers. Because I did work in the local long-term care homes before, I knew some of them professionally. So prior to opening, I actually called the clinics that they worked at and asked if I could bring lunch and just have a meet and greet, just so faces with names, right? Maybe share cell phone numbers. Maybe we could make things a lot easier. One clinic declines. They don't accept lunches from anybody. No problem for whatever reason. And then the other clinic accepted. And I've been going back to that clinic probably 3 or 4 times a year now. Every time I have students, I bring them, and that's where they give their interprofessional education. They do their community practice and things like that. So it's been fantastic to develop these relationships there. So just simply reaching out has really helped in my local area. And then the level of care that we have been able to provide ongoing to patients from a broader area has generated those interactions with a variety of physicians and other prescribers from outside our main small area. So generally we're known now because the physicians are talking to their patients, which one is your pharmacy and how are things going there? And if they're hearing over and over and over again, I go to Kristen's and it's going really well, I mean, then we seem to have that reputation. So being consistent within the pharmacy helps you develop those relationships, and then reaching out. There's no harm in calling and saying, can I come for lunch? Do you want to go to lunch? And then I go to all of the CEs that are put on around the area and sit with the prescribers, and we talk not just about what we do, but it also humanizes us. So there's another person on the other side of that fax machine, so that when I get transferred or when I get hospital discharges on Friday afternoon and I text them saying, what are you doing to us? They understand it's because I am a human and they've just wrecked my afternoon. So I think it's really important to put faces and names together.
I think that human aspect is so important in developing a relationship, because if the interactions are always just transactional, then there is no connectivity really other than that transaction. So very good point. Scott, I'm going to come to you because I haven't heard from you lately, and I'm very interested to know, I mean, when you took over the pharmacy, it was from your dad. Had he developed many of those relationships? How did you carry it on? How do you create new relationships? Because I'm sure new people have moved into the area.
Well, absolutely. Make the connection, network, make a call. All they can do is say no. Understand the dynamics of the office, the gatekeeper. How do you actually get in the door? Who's the right person to talk to actually make things happen? And above and beyond all things, reputation. Do what you say what you do. You will earn their respect, and they will reach out to you when they need you, and will answer you when you need them. But you have to put in the effort. You have to deliver the goods. They're more than willing to interprofessional connect, but they only have the time and space to connect with people who are of worth and value to them. Bring some value, bring some worth to the interaction. And have some respect and understanding that their day is like your day, and there's multiple things going in multiple directions. When you can have that frank and open conversation, then like Kristen said, you can dump on them on Friday afternoon when they dump on you. But yeah, figure, and each office is different. I'm in a large urban center, multi-family, practices, family health teams. There's a lot of pieces. There's a lot of people. Figure out what your best mode of getting through the door or in the door, who the right people are to talk to, nurture those relationships, and then the fruition will come from it naturally.
Yeah, and I also think that one of the key people to become good friends with are all of the secretaries and administrative staff that are sitting in the offices, because you're not nice to them, you can't actually get to talk to the prescriber. So good point. What about you, Chris? Jump in and let me know what your thoughts are with regards to how to build those relationships.
Also, as the previous other owners mentioned this as well. Yeah, so yeah, call, fax, you can definitely network. Very important. Now, the most important thing, as Scott mentioned, is really the reputation and the physicians will hear from the patients, oh, that is my pharmacy, they do this and this, they do such a good job. That's probably the best way to connect with physicians. And because they're the ones faxing prescriptions over all the time too. So they will start to hear pharmacy names. They will know who in the area is servicing a lot of our patients, things like that. And a good example of that was during COVID when there was a lot of Paxlovid prescriptions. So physicians really reached out to my pharmacy because we had a lot of patients who were required counseling, required like therapeutic checks with Paxlovid. So physicians knew, and then the word started spread around, and then just over time, that reputation really built up. And that's really how you do it. Just take care of your patients, and that reputation will build by itself. Eventually, the referrals will get to the physician side, and then they will also let their colleagues know, well, this pharmacy does such a good job. This pharmacy, really takes care of the patients. And that's probably, in my opinion, the best way to advertise for your pharmacy. Just do your job, do a great job, and just let the community will hear. They will know.
Yeah, it's very clear when all of you are talking about relationships that you need to contribute your part to that relationship through your integrity and what you're bringing to add value for their care of their patients, which you now share as your patients. So thank you for that. Shannon, what about for you?
Yeah, I would just say ask them how we can help them, because sometimes the ideas that we have aren't top of mind for them, right? Even something simple as an injection that one patient has difficulty getting to them for. You wouldn't think that they would want to give something up like that, but we had that situation where actually, if we provide this medical directive to you, this helps us not worry about the patient getting to us. You're closer within the pharmacy. They know there's a fee associated with it through you, but they're willing to do that. And that's one way that we can help. So just those simple things of how can we help you? Because they'll have ideas, and they appreciate their input.
Yeah, and I guess the first step is really for you to understand what the needs are. So what do they need to happen? What's currently not being met? Yeah. And then I think each of you bring your creativity and innovation to coming up with solutions. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Zubin.
Thank you all very much. We're getting some questions for our banker, Nav. And of course, we've talked a lot about philosophy of practice and community building and some of the professional rewards of ownership, but many of our audience members are interested in the dollars and cents of community pharmacy ownership. And in particular, questions like what percentage of a pharmacist's costs in beginning a business will banks finance? What are the numbers that we're actually looking at? And what advice do you have for overcoming that initial shock and awe when we start to see the kinds of numbers we're talking about? Nav.
So I will come straight to the main point of the question. What percentage will the bank finance? We will finance every single penny. So
100%.
100%, whether it is a startup or the acquisition. And the other question you asked is, how should they prepare? One of the key things I missed in the previous question is that when a newcomer as a starter for a new startup pharmacy, they come to us, we wanted to make sure that they do understand the business and they do understand the numbers. The best advice would be that they should contact the professional accountant who will help them prepare the projections and the business plan. Because most of the times we will go ahead and make those numbers. Okay, we worked in a pharmacy for a couple of years. Yes, amazing. Not questioning anyone's credibility. We will put the numbers on a paper. But when we go ahead and present it to credit, or I am structuring an application and trying to put it to credit, there are so many numbers of questions that I cannot get the answer to because those numbers most of the times do not make sense. So I would highly suggest to go ahead and sit with an accountant, have those projections. If you prepare them, great. You had experience, great. As long as you don't know numbers, great. But when I need to ask those questions, please make sure you are able to answer it so I can go ahead and put in my comments when we go to credit. Okay. And yes, 100% of financing on that. And also, if someone has got an existing pharmacy and they wanted to go ahead and do an equity takeout, which is refinance, not many banks do it, but National Bank certainly does.
Okay. Are there situations where you've actually turned down pharmacists who have wanted to open independent pharmacies? And maybe could you share some of the reasons so that our audience doesn't fall into those kind of pitfalls?
Yep, there have been instances where I had to turn clients, and that the few of the main reasons, wanted to make sure you have got a clean career history. We don't want any of the comments that could impact negatively your career. And when I say that openly, I'm talking about the OCP. We wanted to make sure that there's rationale. If there's something happens, yes, we all human beings, we all make mistakes, but bank always pay attention that is this individual is going to be bringing a risk to the bank or to the reputation, because these days, as Scott mentioned, Google reviews, bank looks at that. I might not. When it goes, the file goes to the next step, they definitely go ahead and take a key into it and see exactly what it is. Use your words wisely when you go onto the social media these days. Yes, there has been times I wouldn't go ahead and mention it, but it's one of the big doctors which we had to go ahead and, not a pharmacist, but again, the healthcare related, we had to turn them down as well based on that. And then the credit.
So sorry, just interrupt you for a second. So this is something like a Facebook post or something on Instagram that's of a shocking or questionable quality. Okay.
Certainly. And then we look into the credit is important as well. There is a minimum credit requirement with each institution. Every bank differs. And for further on that, make sure your credit is good. Yes, everyone makes a mistake. As I said, we miss payments here and there, but we need to have a right reason for me to go ahead and explain why the payment was missed and how has the situation been resolved with the lender or whosoever it was with. So mainly those three things were the key when we had to go ahead and decline the client for many the reasons as well that tags along with those.
Good. Thank you so much for sharing that information, Nav. Emily, back to you.
So I'm going to ask our panelists to talk to me about, you did talk to me about your decision to go with an independent pharmacy, but in comparison to, there are many corporate pharmacy chains out there. How have you distinguished your pharmacy from what's offered in a large corporate chain? Maybe we'll start off with Scott.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, rehash of what I've already been saying. The ability to do what I want, make the decisions that I think are best, and make them quickly. You know, be responsive to your clientele's needs, your marketplace, what's going on around you. You know, deliver a high level of care and quality and customer service at all times. As your competitors focus on the latest and greatest opportunity that's presented to them, they can often drop the ball when it comes to the day-to-day, what I'll call the bread and butter stuff. And when they don't answer the phone, or nobody can help them at the counter when they come in because everyone's off doing something else, we're all managing a very stressful staffing environment. It's, as owners, there's nothing that I take more importantly or more seriously than taking care of my people, because I know that I need those people to be able to deliver the quality and the services and the products and the expertise that I want to deliver. And without my people, I can't do it all. And I realize that. So I'm very protective of my staff. I want them to want to come to work. And I'm quite proud to say that through COVID, not a single staff member in my businesses chose not to come to work. They understood the importance of what they do. They took the risks that were involved in being front-facing in healthcare. And at the same time, hopefully they did that partially because I was there backing them up with all the right supports, understanding and tools that they needed to do that. As such, you might have to wait 3 days to get a flu shot at Coulter's Pharmacy, or 4 days for a flu shot at Coulter's Pharmacy, or next week to get your COVID shot. But when you do come in for your flu shot or your COVID shot or whatever it is you're coming in for, you have our undivided attention. We've made time. We've agreed to give you the time you need. When you agreed to come to us when we asked, we are going to deliver on that promise. And I know that corporately, my competition around me sometimes loses sight of the importance of that part of pharmacy practice.
So it sounds like quality over quantity, and really continuing to focus on the details and that feeling of caring, both for your staff as well as for your patients. So very good points. Shanna, anything else that you would like to add? Oh, you're still on mute.
There we go. Okay, good. So, yeah, I echo what Scott said, especially, I mean, our staff, we've had some staff members for 15, 20 years. You don't do that by treating them poorly. So you have to take care of your people so that they are loyal and are good representatives of your brand. Also, just being a servant leader, being there and consistently for your community. You think it shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if you treat people well, they'll come back to you. But sometimes that's really hard for some people or organizations. So just treat people well. That golden rule for sure.
Great. Chris, thoughts?
Oh, so I think one of the biggest differences is the values may be different for independent owner versus a corporate pharmacy. Like for independent owners, we really do value patient care most. And when you value that, I really do think, the rest of the stuff will come after. If you value patient care first, the customer service will be there. And your clinical, like everything, the whole thing, follow-up is there. And patients will remember that. Whereas for maybe corporate pharmacies, it's sometimes the value maybe more of the numbers first. It's all about the profits that come first. And that's, I think, one of the biggest differences between the independent pharmacy world and the corporate world. But at the end of the day, I really, at least for myself, like the money really does come afterwards. So if you take care of your patients, you'll be fine. Like patients will keep coming back. They will remember who took care of them when they were sick. So don't worry about that stuff.
Right. So patients come first. And Kristen, last thing.
So it's really a re-echo of what everybody said. It's two things. It's staffing and it's being nimble. So one, when COVID vaccines rolled out, I was able to decide on a booking software, get it implemented, update my website. Granted, I did all of this all by myself. So it's a ton of work, but it was done. I didn't have to run anything up the chain. I didn't have to wait for anything to come down. And I had the answers that I needed to provide to my patients immediately because I made the decisions. And that's how we compete. Bar none, we were ready to go. And we know that the big players were not ready to go as fast as we independent owners. And actually, Shannon and I were 2 of 3 pharmacies in our entire region that covers 10,000 square kilometers to offer COVID vaccines at first because we were ready to go. Absolutely. And then the other thing, of course, is staffing. And in a different way. So the way I think about it in our community pharmacies, we look around and we're like, wow, we're not coping. We need to hire. I didn't check the bank. I don't know what my sales per labor hour is. I don't know what my wage dollar per script is. I don't care about those things. I care about, are we really overwhelmed and are we meeting the needs of our patients? And that's how we decide to staff in our pharmacy. And so far it's been meeting our needs and our bills are getting paid. So that's how we will continue to practice.
So I'm hearing the importance of being nimble and the ability to make those fast decisions and be adaptable. That's great. Thank you. Zubin.
Thank you very much. And our final audience question tonight goes to our banker, Nav. Of course, we're all aware we're living in precarious economic times. Interest rates are rising. Recessions are on the horizon. And several of our audience members are asking very practical questions about, for example, interest rates. Current interest rates on initial loans, and maybe any advice you have for managing independent ownership in these kinds of inflationary and economically turbulent times.
When we do the approval, we always go ahead and, just like any of the residential side, go ahead and add the qualifying rate. We do exactly the same thing as well, just to make sure, just in case our client is looking to go with a variable rate, and because of the change in Bank of Canada's rate and there's a fluctuation, we don't want our clients to suffer. So we always have that cushion in place to begin with. And that only comes off at times, just in case we think, okay, there is any evidence that, okay, the client's going to be okay and they have got a backup to go ahead and inject in case there's a requirement. To short the answer to the question is, I have seen one of the comments on the live video as well. I would say we are nowhere close to that, what's been said there, right? So it's been said prime plus the X amount of numbers, X amount of the bits. We are nowhere close to it. I'd probably say much, much lower. Just to give you a ballpark figure, I'd probably say prime plus 1 to 1.5, just to make sure the clients are aware of it. There's so many different things that we index before we generate the rate. It's case-to-case basis, client-to-client, and depending on the risk rating, as well as one thing, as you guys have mentioned in the past as well, that banned and independent owner. So if it's banned and that is on any of the institutions' approved list, things are a little different. You will get a slightly less risk rating. When it's independent banner in a startup, the risk rating is usually the highest. If there is the acquisition, yes, things are different, then the risk rating will be low. So in short, for the rates, I'd probably say prime, from prime +1 to 1.5. That's just the ballpark figure.
Thank you so much for that answer. Well, that brings our panel discussion to a close, and our event is winding down. But before we conclude for tonight, I would like to thank our presenting sponsor, Pharmasave, and our supporting sponsor, National Bank. If you would like to learn more about these organizations and what they can offer, please visit the links in the chat in our video description. Many of our student and alumni events are made possible through the support of our sponsors, but also through donations from community members like you. If you would like to support our Giving Tuesday campaign, please donate using the link in the chat. And to learn more about giving back to the community in other ways, such as mentorship or volunteering, please contact our Advancement and Alumni Relations team. Our faculty, our students, and our profession need all of us to contribute to their development and the development of the next generation of pharmacists. Thank you so much for your support.
And we couldn't let you go without really thanking this incredible audience that we had tonight. We do invite you to stay up to date on all upcoming alumni offerings by visiting pharmacy.utoronto.ca and or following our alumni Facebook page or LinkedIn groups. Thank you very much.
And a final thank you to our amazing, dedicated, and inspirational panelists. You make us proud of our profession. And of course, a final thank you to our administrative staff, Laura, Claire, and Annalise, for organizing tonight's event, managing the technology, and making this so much fun for all.